Noam Chomsky says Great Palast upsets all the right people. I think so. The Guardian calls him one of the most important investigative reporters of our time for his reports for BBC. He has to travel a ways to do some of his best reporting. But we're glad to have him here tonight. He's the one that busted the story. Remember the exclusion of black voters that solidified the election steal? Jeb Bush. Is he related to that other Bush? Took the lead on that. We haven't seen the last of him. Don't count the Bushes out. But that was a very important story about the stealing of the US election. And it threw the spotlight on how shaky the electoral system and the monitoring of that system was. Nobody could have believed it. Great Palast has a brand new book, Vultures Picnic, and we are honored to help him kick off his tour. Today is the official book release of Vultures Picnic, and we are honored to have Great Palast in on this. Greg, come on up and tell us something.
We are here. We want to talk tonight about why we occupy. Okay. Wait. Oh. Had a good book here. I want to, by the way, this is very personal for me. You know, I was used to be an investigator, decided to become an investigative reporter, and so I immediately found out that I had to leave the country, my country. And I was reporting several things, including that the election in Florida. I'm in London watching all these black people get removed from they can't seem to vote. And I'm thinking, oh God, there must be a list that's aiming at black people, knocking them off voter rolls. Then I got the computer tapes, and there they were. And that was front page news in England. That was front page news in every nation in the planet. Top of the nightly news on BBC, everywhere but America, where it dropped, where it bounced right off the Berlin Wall until a kind of Dennis Bernstein called me. It said, I'm with Pacifica Radio, KPFA. And he brought my voice and the information home. This is a homecoming of the truth. This is a homecoming of information. This is why I want to thank Dennis Bernstein. I want to thank Andrew Phillip, who has really taken the helm at KPFA. I want to thank Project Censored, which I hope they go out of business. Why are we censored? So at least we have the project, and bless you, Mickey Huff and Peter Phillips, Project Censored, Link TV, our new eyeball on the truth. And I don't know whether he made it here. Did Rabbi Lember of Tikkun make it here? I didn't invite him because, but I think he's ministering over the occupation, because I wanted to ask him, since he's a friend of God, why the Lord asked both Mitt Romney and Herman Cain to run. We talked to him, and actually was, actually I did get a call from Rick Perry, who asked me to change my book from Vultures Picnic to, it says Vultures Picnic, in pursuit of petroleum pigs, power pirates, and high finance carnivores. He asked me to change it to a job creators picnic. In pursuit of petroleum job creators, power job creators, and high finance job creators. Maybe. because I prefer the truth. Now, I want to apologize for something, by the way. I want to apologize because my publisher only sent about 100 books out here, and obviously there's a lot of folks here, and there won't be enough. But please, this week, if you're interested in this, go online, get to gregpalast.com, vulturespicnic.org, pick up a copy of the book. See, the thing is that it's the first day the book's out and we're already at the top of the bestseller list. So we are running short. Because it seems like there's something's coming for you. For information. So please, don't blame Miss Nally. There's a few books back there. I will sign them, get to my sites, I'll get you signed stuff, and I'm going to do something else for you because we kind of screw up here. It's my publisher, you know, please be kind to them. They're capitalist pigs, they don't understand. Penguin, the biggest publisher in the world, their main stock was Gaddafi, right? So you can imagine how much they love me. And I love them too. They asked me, there is, by the way, an enhanced download version of the book where every chapter has a film at the front of it. And I read the opening chapter, they charge you for this. And they said, the one thing you should do though, Greg, is just don't make these films, you know, just don't put them out for free. So you can get them for free at my site, vulturespicnic.org. If you get the book, just send a note to me, Greg, I got it. Send me the films and you can get those. You can always, you know, get the whole version. But all those chapters, you saw some of those films you couldn't hear because of the sound and everything, but you get the idea. You're going to be able to see journalism, the raw stuff, why we occupy. See, this is a book, Vultures Picnic, is about the 1%. We aren't occupying Wall Street. We don't have a problem with Wall Street. Wall Street's an address, man. It is a name on a sign. This is not a fight about real estate. Sometimes you forget about that when we're, you know, tussling with the police. I think it's about the space. No. It's about them. It's about that 1%. It's about the movers and shakers who move and shake us. So let's go through. Let's just take some examples from the book, some of the investigations. Kind of at random. Why we occupy chapter 1. We occupy for Sally Ann Mattingly. She's an Osage Indian. A couple back in the 80s. She sees the truck pulling up to her near her trailer. There's a little strip of oil, those horses that go up and down, you know. Pulls out a few barrels of oil. There's a truck that comes in and pulls out the oil. That's part of the Native Reservation oil. They pull it up. By the way, can you hear me back there clearly? Because there's a big echo here, and if there's a problem, you let me know. There's a problem. This better? I want to get it right. Okay. Should I be closer or further? Closer. Like this. Okay, is that better? I don't want it to be all mud. There's enough confusion here. Is that okay? Now, Sally Ann Mattingly wants a truck. It takes about 40 barrels of oil out of her property. She makes about $30 a week from the royalties. Survives on that. And they take about 48 barrels and they mark down 30. All over the Indian Reservation, the Osage Reservation of Oklahoma. These trucks are showing up and they're supposed to pull out the oil, they mark it down. They take 40, they mark down 30. They take 50, they mark down 20, etc. Now, how I know this? We were filming it. I used to be an investigator before I was an investigative reporter. We were filming it. We had the film. We watched it. Tracked it back. Hundreds of trucks moving across Indian reservations, pulling the oil. Not right now what there was. All goes to the platform. There's a guy standing on the platform exhorting the truck drivers. We want overage. Overage is the amount that you don't tell the Indians you took. We want overage, or else you lose your job. The guy standing on the dock is named Charles Cook. we had an executive wired. Executives talking about Coke. He had asked Coke, so why? See, Coke was, when he was standing at that dock, he was stealing, he was making money the old-fashioned way, stealing it from Indians, but he'd already made his money the older-fashioned way. He'd inherited it from Daddy. And so, a senior executive of this company asked Coke, why? I mean, why are you, skimming oil, taking $30 from each of these Indians? And Coke said, I want what's coming to me. And that's all of it. It's on the tape. Well, I thought he should get what was coming to him too. We're working with the FBI. It says, Coke Industries, crime on an Indian reservation, theft, racketeering influence, and corrupt organization. This is the indictment. And I wanted to get so I said, could I get the proposed information? And I got a very informative packet from the FBI, but I had the documents. But I had 2 hot documents, but he had 2 senators, and 2 senators beat 2 pieces of evidence every day. But that's why we occupy. Why we occupy Chapter 2. We occupy Jason Alexander. Now, on April 20th of last year, I was in Vegas on investigation. And I was going to meet with Daniel Becknell. Someone taste this water first. Daniel Becknell, Cajun lawyer, and he looked pretty grim for a guy who's supposed to be joining me and getting drunk. And he said, he'd gotten a call from the Coast Guard, one of his clients. He's a Cajun lawyer in southern Louisiana. And he said the Coast Guard had asked him if they could open an emergency safety capsule floating in the Gulf, because the rig had just exploded and the capsule blew off. And they thought his client, JC, was inside, cooked alive. They just wanted his permission to open it up. If they opened it up, he wasn't there. He'd been evaporated on the deep water horizon. And so Anderson Cooper ran down to clean off oily pelicans with that mushmouth fraud, Bobby Jindal, after they dipped him in the oil. And, but I knew I got a message. I didn't go there at first. I got a message from a ship floating in the Caspian Sea off the coast of Azerbaijan. Now, if you don't know where Azerbaijan is, don't worry. When the 82nd Airborne lands there, you'll learn about Kabul, Mogadishu, Saigon. That's how Americans learn geography, so don't worry. It's one of those, Azerbaijan is one of those oil nations pooped out by the Soviet Union when it collapsed. And I got a message, cable, said, would not be wise for you to communicate by this IT system. It's happened before. Click. That's it. Now, if I were CNN, if I were Anderson Cooper, I suppose I'd go out and interview Brad Pitt, but BBC says they're going to get on a plane to Azerbaijan, to Baku. Not easy to get in, harder to get out. So I got this cable. And sure enough, to get there, we had to go through, how do you, and sure enough, we took off, crossed the desert to BP terminal, getting to the evidence, getting to the witnesses. Unfortunately, going across the open desert there, it ended up for me like it did for Rob not too well. I got arrested by the local dictatorship. First there was the BP cops who had little oil wells and oil barrels on their lapels, really, the oil police. Then the Secret Service, which is the secret police. They're not too secret there. They would trail us and make sure that they could see us. And so I you know, the first thing they do is they take your film. Can you hear me? Oh, I just want to make sure. So the first thing they do is they say, give us your film. We give them their film. They say, now give us your chips. They learned that trick, that they give them the film, but you still have the computer chips, you give the chips. But they let me keep my pen, and of course, this bad penny was really on my chief investigatrix gave me one of those Austin Power pens, which had the camera in it. So I came out with the evidence that there was indeed. Let me tell you what it was. At the BP rig, British Petroleum once again had a rig with Transocean, same setup, and these are the same crap cement, this quick dry stuff. And time is money, time is money. They use the quick dry cement in the Caspian Sea. Same as in the Gulf. And in the Caspian Sea, 2 years before the Deepwater Horizon, it blew out, same exact thing, for the same exact cause. In other words, and then they went to Congress and said, under oath, 6 months before the Deepwater Horizon, a year and a half after the Caspian explosion, nothing's, we swear, nothing has ever gone wrong on one of these rigs. Under oath, the oil companies, including BP. In other words, it wasn't an accident. It was a homicide. Okay? And that's why we occupy. Right? Yeah. Why we occupy? Oh, God. Too many choices. Chapter 3, I think we're going to occupy for Chief Criollo and his kids. So I'm watching PBS. The Petroleum Broadcast System, and they did an investigation of BP called The Spill. And my dog and I were watching, and they said, you know, well, for years BP has ignored safety lapse warnings. My dog looked at me like, no shit, Sherlock. I said, yeah, BP's ignored problems with drilling for years. No, actually, it's PBS, which has ignored the oil drilling problems for years. I thought that they were going to apologize and say, you know, we just ignored this despite all the warnings and filmmakers and journalists coming to us with the material. And so we apologize. Please return your mugs and your Ken Burns DVDs. We are so sorry. No, they asked for more money. And not only that, there was a sad, happy side to the story of the spill. See, because the problem they decided was that it was BP's culture. They didn't have no culture. They didn't wear gloves at the opera. BP didn't have a safety culture, unlike Chevron. They actually had a Chevron executive. Now, we are in Chevron territory, and I knew that there's someone in here who has a document in their file that says confidential, secret, you know, not for eyes only, don't give this to Greg Palast. No, really, these things that come to me, this is what I want. We're getting together, so you're all deputized. I mean it. I need you. Go to gregpalast.com. Vulturespicnic.org, where it says join the conspiracy. I really want your docs. I want them. Oh yeah, PBS, Chevron. Oh, they forgot. I forgot to tell you something. Because they forgot too. If you go on their website, you go on the Wayback Machine, they kind of removed it. The #1 national sponsor of PBS is Chevron. Not that there's a connection. We don't make connections, right? Well, I know that Chevron has a good safety culture. I told that to BBC and they said, no, Palast, we can't do that. I actually wanted to run it. BBC said, no, you're going to Ecuador. I said, Ecuador. And they said, into the jungle, into the rainforest, where Chevron has been accused of poisoning indigenous people that live there. And And Chevron has said, if you go here to Richmond, Chevron has said that, oh, it's a big fraud. It's the biggest fraud in history. That's a quote. Okay. Now, it could be. You have to understand, I've seen a lot of stuff in my life, and there's a lot of scams, okay? Now, I was told that it had been arranged for me to have a boat to go into the Amazon and to get to the indigenous villages to see what, for myself, the evidence. And I was told that there'll be a boat waiting for me, so I'm expecting the African Queen, you know, with Humphrey Bogart to come down. I'm dropped off at the end of a dirt track in the middle of the jungle. By the way, if you're in the Sierra Club, it's a rainforest, but when you're there, it's a jungle, let me tell you. Well, it does a rainforest because it's raining, it's coming down, and I'm in this mud path in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and I'm waiting for the boat, and I said, so the boat, and this Jeep driver says to me, Subarco, your boat. And it was, and I think you may have seen in one of these clips, it was a dugout log with a hand-carved pattern. And I'm thinking, I'm watching in my mind, my fedora float down to Brasilia, you know? And thank God, I saw the film, like out of the rainforest, out of nowhere, this indigenous guy shows up, picks up the paddle, and we're going across the Amazon. We get to the village and we meet, and I want to meet the fraudsters, so I'm looking for Chief Criollo. And this guy shows up very formal in this war paint, very formal meeting. And first of all, I wanted to know, well, how they got, this is their land, it's Kofan natives, how did Chevron, Texas and Chevron, get a hold of this oil, their oil? I was interested in that too, like, whose oil is it that's poisoning them, right? Is it their Texas or theirs? And they said, well, they're told they had sold it to Texaco. And the guy said, well, in the 70s, a helicopter came down and landed there. His father was chief, he remembered it. And they explained to the Indians in Spanish, the oil, and they're going to come and they're going to give them something for the oil. And of course, the Kofan don't speak any Spanish, they speak Kofan. But they're getting this spiel in Spanish. But they understand that they're being given something. So they're being given, for their oil, they're being given big blocks of cheese. So the Indians say, well, the cheese smelled funny, so we threw it in the jungle, right? And then they brought them diesel fuel, which they said they were going to make from the forest. That's what they're going to pull up. And they said, well, what do you do with that? They said, well, you just kind of rub it on your arms and cure your ailments. That's what you do with it. I can tell you, I've been down the Gulf, which is ugly. But the Gulf looks like a Bahamas beach compared to the rainforest there. They've turned it into a toxic swamp where they have to worry that the kids will touch the water of the rainforest. And Chief Criollo's son, who was 2 years old, went swimming in the water hole, didn't see the sheen, came out vomiting blood, and then dropped dead. And then his other son died of leukemia. So I went to see the Chevron Texaco Wars in Kyoto. You get to meet them, and look at the films, you read the book, this guy in yellow golf pants with the bouffant hairdo. He says, what? These are the only kids in the world who get cancer? I can't believe it. If you see it, you can't believe it. Okay. Well, could be right. And then he says, slyly, he says, well, and then I showed him an epidemiological study that says that there is an absolute insane epidemic of childhood leukemias in the drilling areas. Yeah, okay, maybe it's the oil, but you can't prove it's our oil. There's no documents which prove it's our oil. So I said, well, what about, maybe that's because of this document. And it's from, this is in Spanish, and it is from the Presidente de la Junta, which is what they call the Chief of Texaco. Really? R.C. Shields, Presidente de la Junta. And there's a lot of Spanish, my Teresa Spanish is crap, but you can understand it. All it says is, here's what we do with all the, it says there's documentation out in the field and in our offices regarding the dumping of toxic waste. These documents should be removed y ser destruidos. Destruidos, so I don't know what that means. But I asked them what it means. And suddenly the Chevron lawyers were quiet, and they stopped giggling. And they said, "We're sure there's an explanation." I said, "I'm sure there is." That was 2 years ago. I'm still waiting for the explanation. I'm still waiting for the explanation from PBS. And that's why we occupy. Why we occupy? Chapter 4. Why we occupy for Paul Comcoff? We occupy for e-talk. Now I come back from Baku, which is the capital of Azerbaijan. Don't worry about that. After I meet with to get in, by the way, I had to meet with you know how you cover up an explosion? You have to do it through a bribery, babes, blowjobs, we'll explain all that. It's in the book. But I get a message from the Chief of Intelligence for the Free Republic of the Arctic. Come up right now to Kaktovik. So I look at Google Map, and it's an island above the Arctic Circle. So I'm waiting, okay, I figured a member of my staff is now going to send me a message from Santa Claus, right? But then I get a second message with some correspondence between the Chief of Intelligence of the Free Republic of the Arctic and Shell Oil's major executives. And it says, "We need you up here now to meet with e-talk." Now, e-talk, I know from my work in Alaska, is a legendary whale hunter and Eskimo leader. And so I chartered the first plane I could up into above the Arctic to meet with him. And now this is very interesting. I don't know if you read the New York Times, all the news that ships in print. But it says here, you get the most interesting stuff in the ads. A full-page ad from Coca-Cola. It says, Coca-Cola Arctic Home. We're turning our cans white because turning our back isn't an option. And there's like 3 polar bears there. And it says that they are going to work with, you're going to make a $1 donation, buy a white can of Coke, make a $1 donation, and they will match it so that they can, to help protect the polar bear and to create we're going to create a safe haven for the polar bear. I thought polar bears had a safe haven. It's called a polar cap. Why aren't polar bears allowed to stay in the polar region? What happened? Why do they suddenly need a safe haven? What is making it unsafe? What's unsafe? Mr. Cole? That's why I went up there. Okay, so Chief Akuchik, who's the local chief, takes me out with e-talk to the whale carcass, where there's polar bears. He says they're tagging these bears. And they tell us that's just to track them. But we know they're tagging the bears to remove them so that they could drill here. So they'll be given their little zoo cages by Coca-Cola, which are white cans, but they're removing them. See? And I said, come on, they're not going to drill here. This is an Arctic shelf. Water is just off the Arctic wildlife refuge in Elmore. And so I sit inside a whale carcass, eating with my host fermented whale meat and congealed blood, which tastes like fermented whale meat and congealed blood. And just make sure to try not to commit the social faux pas vomiting on my host. And, E-Talk, whale, explains that whales don't like to swim in oil any more than you do, not than polar bears. So this is what's happening. And if the whales leave, he brought me there for a simple reason. This is not, they don't take whales as a cultural experience. They take it as an eating experience. If there's no whales, there's no Eskimos. They're gone. Okay? This is it. Okay? And he's not going to tolerate it. They're going to occupy the whale birds. They're going to occupy the whale birds. Now, I want to tell you something. When you see E-Talk, some people here may recognize him under his former, or his lower 48 name, as they call it. Professor Edwardson, who is head of the American Native Studies program here at Berkeley. Professor Edwardson is great. He is the best whale hunter on the planet. He came down here to teach, but he was removed. He had a little bit of a time here because he held he had a final. His final, if any one of you were in one of his classes, he held a final at Alcatraz Island. He ordered all his students to appear with him, get on a pirated boat, go to Alcatraz, armed, for the final, where there was an occupation of Alcatraz Island. You think you invented it? Man, forget it. And they were ready. He said, you come here, and if necessary, you will die here. And that's your final. Well, the university apparently disagreed. They said you cannot require, he said, no, because he said there were some students who didn't get on the boat. And he said, I've flunked every one of their motherfucking racist classes. Don't mess with E-Talk. The university had an idea that it was not appropriate to hold to require that a final incorporate a felony. So the E-Talk was decided to go back to whaling. But it's a longer story because see, when I saw that column of smoke go up on Deepwater Horizon, I knew. Because I've been the chief investigator for the natives on the breakup of the Exxon Valdez, and said Exxon on the ship, but the real culprit, the one I recommended racketeering charges for, was British Petroleum. 4 volumes of evidence on British Petroleum, which I have. This material's in the book. By the way, if you get Vultures Picnic, you'll also get a key to the file cabinet, which will give you, because this is just the open, this is just the road there, okay? Take the road and lead you to the file cabinet. I want you to see what I see, the raw stuff, raw material, these documents that I get from inside. Okay? And I gotta tell you, the natives were told, we need the oil. America needs the oil. They're all patriots. They're very patriotic. And they were told, and they said, well, but if you drill oil here, you ship oil out of Valdez. The oil companies gave Valdez, it was the only place in all of Alaska you could have a pipeline terminal in the center. The only place that was ice safe and earthquake safe. And they said, yeah, but they wanted to buy Valdez, the oil companies. And they said, well, we want one thing. We want safety and jobs. So they hired the natives to do oil spill response. In case there's an oil spill, it's like a firehouse. You have your fire trucks. Well, after a couple of years, when the Exxon Valdez hit Bly Reef, it hit right outside the native village of Petit, but the natives were watching that ship hit the reef. They had all been trained to respond to an oil spill. There's it's not rocket science, it's got rubber around it. It's like a big condom. Suck out the oil, so rubber, suck. It's real simple. That's how you stop an oil spill from spreading. But there was no rubber, there was no suckers, and the natives weren't allowed to touch it all because before the Exxon Valdez hit, they'd all been fired. Every single native, there was not any emergency crew. But there were lists of people, but they were every one of them ghosts. So this had happened before. This had happened before. But the natives had sold Valdez, the most valuable piece of real estate on this planet, more valuable than Park Avenue. And they got, for a payment of $1. That's what they got. So that's why we occupy. Now, chapter 5. Let's get closer to home. Let's get closer to home. Let's get closer to home. San Bruno. We occupy for Janessa Gregg. She was 13 years old. She won't be 14. Okay? I'm sorry if I sound, you're used to Greg Palast being very funny. There's a lot of humor in the book, like bribery, death, destruction, explosion. There's a lot of humor. Don't worry. I promise. I don't know why tonight. I guess because the counter-revolution has begun at the occupation. So forgive me for being a little more darker. But, so Janessa Gregg, right? It was an accident. The pipe exploded in San Bruno. 9 people dead. Yeah, it was an accident. Then I got a note from, I just call him the Pig Man. There's a chapter called Pig in the Pipeline. Right? They're going to run a pipe from Canada down to Houston, right? It's going to be safe. Don't worry. They're going to use the latest equipment to make sure that it's safe. The equipment that they use is called a pig. Okay? In every pipeline, you run a pig through the pipeline. We're not talking about Lord Brown of British Petroleum. I'm talking about what's called a pipeline inspection gauge, a pig. Okay? Now, the pig has whiskers, literally like little wire whiskers, and when it moves through, it feels when there's corrosion, when there's leaks, when there's wrong pressure. They're called smart pigs. Smart pigs, they're robots, and they send off beeps and boops, and if something goes wrong, the pig squeals. Why did the pig squeal in San Bruno? Why did the pig squeal in Yellowstone pipeline? Why did the pig squeal on the Alaska pipeline when it just destroyed the tundra? Why didn't the pig squeal? How do you silence a pig? Well, you silence a robot with software. Now, if you're a real conspiracy nut, you would think that maybe someone mucked with the software so it wouldn't squeal when it's supposed to. So you remember, the pig squeals, so you have to replace the pipe under the law, and that's really damn expensive, about $1 million a mile on average. So Pigman sent me a note. The pigs have been fixed. The pigs have been silenced electronically with software. I said, how do you know? I meet with him, I fly to meet him in Summer, USA, as I said. How do you know? He said, because I did it. I was ordered to do it. I actually found the problem. I saw that the software was wrong. It's not just a good idea, it's the law. The law is very specific. We have these very thick rule books in America. We don't like rules. Little men with thick rule books, yeah. If a pipeline explodes, you want the thickest rule book under you, man. Okay? And they're very specific about how sensitive these pigs must be. He says it was a violation of the law. So he had his crews working night and day for weeks. His software team working to fix it. And he thought he was going to get some type of kind of reward. Look what I did. I found it. And they said, what are you doing? We work for British Petroleum. We work for Chevron. We work for Occidental. What are you doing? If we give them this software, the pig will be squealing all over the country. We're going to have to replace 100,000 miles of corroded, busted, lousy pipe. They're not going to pay for that. So he quit, but he thought of it more of a professional software problem. And he contacted me before, and I said, would you go on air? No. Even if I put you just in shadow? No. If I change your voice? No, I can't do that. My career will be ruined. I'll be destroyed. That was before San Bruno. Then I said, is there anyone else that told me? So he gave me names of others who could corroborate the story. and others agreed to go on the air. And then, Janessa Craig and 8 others were burnt alive in the pipe blue. And the other witnesses to the software scam ran away. They knew they were part of the homicide. But my man came forward and said, now I will speak. And if you read in the book, he lays it all out. And by the way, if you think we just make these accusations, all this material is put in detail to British Petroleum and the oil companies, every bit of it in detail and every word of it in detail. And you will get their responses. You will get their responses, which is, well, you know how it is. The pig was fixed. The pipe exploded. And that's why we occupy. And we occupy for Jake Horton. Now, Jake was a scumbag. Was a scumbag. And he made payoffs for the biggest power company on the planet, Southern Company. And when he got caught, they decided to hang him out to dry. So he said, I'm gonna rat on this company. There's so much crud inside here. I'm gonna tell the truth. The Attorney General had an appointment with him. That's it. He borrowed the company plane 12 minutes after the plane took off. Boom! Jake is spread all over Georgia. Jake Horton. You know, accidents happen. Accidents happen. But then I get a note. It has taken some time, but we have figured out who murdered Jake Horton and the weapon used. Now, by the way, I talked to the CEO of the power company, and he said, I guess Jake saw no way out, no other way out. He decided that Jake took himself out. I do know that Jake walked on the plane with a valise with some documents in it. Well, those documents are gone. That valise is gone. Jake is gone. Well, but not every copy of the documents are gone. This is just a bunch of numbers, but it's a list of spare parts for a nuclear plant that were charged to the public, except they don't exist. I recommended racketeering charges. The government was ready to file racketeering charges. Grand jury decided on racketeering charges, and the Supreme Court said that power companies are not liable to racketeering charges. It's kind of like our banking laws. If you break into a bank from the inside, it's okay. It's just an exemption. Sorry, Jake. Well, don't worry. Southern Company has just been designated as one of the 4 companies which will receive $8 billion from the Obama administration to build the new generation of nuclear plants. $8 billion. Oh, by the way, the $8 billion, in case you didn't hear about it, the $8 billion was inside the emergency bill for armor for our troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so that's all that was mentioned, and so we unanimously passed body armor for our troops with a little inside note and $8 billion for nuclear plants. I kid you not. And so as soon as I saw that, I said, that's brilliant. It smells so bad, I smell Houston, and I was right. Now there's a chapter in the book. It's because I thought it's important that you know, because there's a chapter in the book in which you will see, in which I'm all of the front pages of the newspapers in Britain. Sex scandal rocks British Labour Party convention, page 1, page 2, page 3. There was a reason why I was in Miss Janeka's room with my pants off. It's a good journalistic reason. It's part of the investigation. Power industry. But whatever ever, okay, you have to, the stories first. Now, it was a bit of a setup, but I lose the James Bond award about once a week. But you'll get the explanation of why in there. But by the way, the headlines, the setup was done by a great journalist his name is Puss Morgan, but here he goes under the name Piers Morgan. Did it for Tony Blair in the industry. But the guys that went after me set this up to smear me with this. So they have a file on me, I'm showing you the file, because that's how they try to discredit you, that's how they try to scare you. They're going to put all this crap in public, so I'll show it to you before they do. So they have a file on me, but I have a file on them. Okay? I get something from the mail. No return address, if there wasn't, I happened to burn the envelope too quick to notice. Someone was being good. It's about that thick. We called it the radioactive brick. And it happened to have, this is a bit of it. You'll see some of it in the book, in Vultures Picnic. By the way, if you're not hearing, let me know. Put your hand up and say, I can't hear you. Because I want you to get this. If you can't hear all of it, don't worry, you can read it in the book until page 4 goes into effect, and you can. We call it radioactive brick because it's the information from inside the company. It's inside this same company, NRG. Like that for energy, NRGQ. And the guys who went after me, whatever, they were also designated as one of the 4 companies to build a new nuclear plant. That's fair, because they came up with a fantastic price. 25 companies bid for this, and they came up with the lowest price to build a nuclear plant, $5 billion, which in nuclear land, which is another planet than ours. In that planet, $5 billion is cheap. Okay? Well, it's $5 billion, but then in this document, it says, okay, it's $5 billion a year. That's what they give 5 billion. So he says 5 billion. You can't read this. But then it says over here, submitted in confidence, trade secrets, or proprietary. They don't know which cover they're going to use to suppress this document. But at the bottom, it's $14 billion. Now, 5 billion and 14 billion, even if Bush were here and he could take off his shoe, he would know that it's not the same number. Now, when you have 2 different numbers, the numbers don't match. In the old days, we used to call it fraud. We used to call it racketeering. And we used to read people their rights. But now we just call it job creation. Now don't worry, because if you think that fraudsters shouldn't be allowed to build a nuclear plant or operate a nuclear plant, then I could go, and there's more stories about these guys. Okay. Don't worry, because they did have a creepy background. So they knew that that was a problem. So they told the Department of Energy, worry not. We will not act. We're going to turn over control of the building and operation of this plant to the most trusted nuclear plant builder, operator on the planet, Tokyo Electric Power. Kid you know. Kid you know. Okay. Oh. Jay Court. So that's why we occupy, but also now, Fukushima. All right. So I have the document here from Tokyo. It includes all the documents from Tokyo Electric Power, right? Toshiba. And then in March, Fukushima begins to melt, following an earthquake and a tsunami. And this madman in my chief investigator said, we're watching the news. And there's Anderson Cooper telling us everything's going to be all right. Because they have these emergency diesel generators to keep things fine. But there's a problem, because no one planned for an earthquake this big. Really said, the plant's not going to hold. She said, how do you know that? I said, open the file that says SQ in the back. Someone once said, do we have a big giant warehouse like in Raiders of the Lost Ark? Yes, we actually do. Literally hundreds of files, of file drawers. I said, go to SQ 1986. Pull out a notebook. Every engineer, every structural engineer, nuclear engineer in the world keeps a little notebook every day, a diary. And this is from the builder. This is from the structural engineer. Quote, Wiesel was very upset. He seemed very nervous, very agitated. In fact, the plant was riddled with problems that no way on earth, this is handwritten notes, no way on earth could stand an earthquake. The team of engineers sent in to inspect found that most of these components, again I'm reading, would, quote, completely and utterly fail during an earthquake. They knew. They knew. They knew. And they did it anyway. Now, the company that did that, the notes from the engineers that I have, from massive government investigation I kept those files. That is the company that was designing Fukushima. But now they don't exist because in that case, right, I was able to bring racketeering charges against the company, the nuclear plant builder. And the jury found them liable, hit them for $4 billion, and they were put out of business. Corporations are people, except they're different than we people, than human people, because unlike human people, when they don't die, they're immortal. They just shift their shape. And Stone and Webster, the racketeering company that was exposed for faking earthquake-proofing tests, is now Shaw Construction. Now, Shaw Construction, the company which has been designated by all 4 companies that are building nuclear plants with their government guarantees to be the chief contractor to build those plants. Okay. And they just got a new contract to rebuild Fukushima. And that's why we occupy. Okay? Otherwise, so I was going to take you to Geneva, this bad penny where we're following this dictator. Where is this? I know you want. I know that there's this note I got from Timmy Geithner. He's your Secretary of Treasury. That when things get rough, I pretend I'm British. Hang on, here's Timmy's note. Timmy. Yeah. Oh. I don't think that's it. Oh, here we go. Timmy Geithner, another confidential cable, to Larry Summers, who is our economic czar, or some call him the Typhoid Mary of economics. Anyway, the key thing here is that it was a memo about how to force every nation to deregulate its banks. He calls it the end game. But to me what's interesting is not that these guys talk about forcing the rest of the planet to join the financial leper colony. and how they're going to do it, but who they do it with. Now, I know some of you think that Geithner and Summers and our political leaders get together secretly with the banks and come up with these schemes. Bank of America, 415-622-2255, Citibank CEO 559-2732. Write these down. These are the personal phone numbers of the CEOs of 5 biggest banking corporations on the planet, including Goldman Sachs. And actually, as of the day before yesterday, one of them, they were quickly changing these numbers because Penguin thought that when I put it in the book that these are like fake, and I changed them to something new. When you borrow money from a bank, they want your phone number, right? Well, they borrowed trillions from us. Shouldn't we have their phone number? So I got it. But anyway, got the importance of the nightmare. Give a call from Greg Palast. Any good books, right? Really? Someone got through yesterday, one of the reviewers got a copy. He said, holy cow, that's real. It is. And so, anyway, but the important thing is that they don't move, they don't stick these guys without calling their banker buddies to make sure it's all okay. But I couldn't really actually simply accept this document as real, besides calling it numbers and saying, is this real? So since it was about how to abuse the WTO, so through my position I was able to get a meeting with the Director General, the Generalissimo of Globalization itself, the Director General of the WTO, Pascal Lamy. And I said to Pascal, he said, we are not the cabal of evil bankers who meet secretly. And I didn't bring up the point that he was the head of Crédit Lyonnais, the biggest French bank. I said, okay. And I showed him this. And I showed him several other documents. And of course, I said, I just need, basically talk them away, but he authenticated them for me. So the first thing I did then is I got on a plane to Quito, Ecuador, because the president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, had said, I believe, there is a conspiracy of bankers, the IMF, the World Bank, WTO, to destroy our nation, to take our oil and our resources. And of course, let's be honest, it's kind of a conspiracy, but I wanted to show him the documents where he's absolutely correct. So I gave those documents to him, and he copied them. And see, what was important to him is Rafael Correa. Why did he stand up? Why does he occupy? Right? See, why did he stand up to the IMF and World Bank and the rest? And why is this economy so successful? When he told the vultures and the buzzards to buzz off, when he told the IMF to stick it, when he threw out Occidental Petroleum and renationalized the oil company, said our oil is for us, and when he said if Chevron doesn't pay the natives for killing them, I will hunt them down, and I will take their assets. We're going to change this thing around. Why did he occupy that space and courage? So I asked him. His father, he said, he never talked about this because it's politically incorrect in Latin America. You always want to show you're a hotshot. He has a doctorate in economics. He's called the Dr. President. He taught at the University of Illinois. But one thing he never talked about before, I asked about his dad. He said, my dad was a mule. He took drugs into the U.S. because his kids were starving. And he got caught. And he spent 4 years in a Texas prison. And he came back broken, jobless, destroyed, until he committed suicide. That's why we're occupied. Now, last week, I was in the Congo at a cholera quarantine center in the 21st century. A cholera quarantine center in the Congo, in the richest country on the planet. It's just that it's not their riches. They thought they had it because there was a shipment of, and what happened was there was a plan to give 40 million people clean water. That's the problem. And to pay for this 40 million, they sold a load of cobalt. The Congolese renationalized the cobalt mines. The war's over, sold it to the Congolese, and on the high seas it was grabbed by vultures. Not the feathered kind, I don't want to insult them, but the kind that don't wait for things to die. Okay? Financial vultures. These are guys who take old debts, they find debts from poorest nations in the world. They pay pennies on the dollar for them. And then Bono gives a concert. See? And we wipe out the debts of these poor nations. So we give up our claims of billions of dollars against these poor nations, which allows the vultures to swoop in. Okay. Now who are the vultures? Why should we care? These international repo men. Paul, the vulture singer, uber vulture, #1. He's the #1 donor to the Republican Party since Ken Lay shoved in his moral coil. This is where they get their money. This is the 1%. And that's why we're here, to talk about the 1%. Right? This is what they are. They job creators or they carry insurers. Okay? Now, how do you get these guys? How do you get them in a nation? Well, intimidation, bribery. So I find out before I was in the Congo, 2 days before I was in the Congo, I was in Sarajevo in Bosnia. Another war-destroyed nation. The money was owed from the Congo to Bosnia. Because Bosnia had built, they used to have they had a big factory that built power towers and power lines. Congo was desperate for power, owed some money to the Congo. So these two war-destroyed nations, in both cases, roughly 20% of the population was murdered in a civil war. They got together and said, forget the West, we'll build, Bosnia will build power lines to the Congo, Congo will sell the power and for resources, we'll pay money to Bosnia. But then they said that they owed some money to Bosnia for the prior power lines. They said, well, okay, we can now, we don't need the rest of the world. These two war-torn nations together can rebuild, we can rebuild ourselves. We'll put those, we had thousands of Bosnian workers out of work. Put them to work, put the Congolese back to work. It was an extraordinary story. And then they said, well, wait, what happened to the piece of paper that put this together? It was purchased. The deal was purchased for $3 million by a vulture. Now, how do you get that? How does that happen? It was given to him by the Prime Minister of Bosnia. So, I find out. I go to Sarajevo, and there's still murder cases all over the place. So while the war is on, people are dying. A guy named Brankovic became Prime Minister and head of the power company, had sold off the deal to a guy who goes by the name of Goldfinger. Now, if you've seen the James Bond films, that Goldfinger is a Girl Scout compared to the real Goldfinger. Who I've met, who didn't want to be me. Right? And Goldfinger, so the Bosnian financial police called for the arrest and jailing of their own prime minister for this illegal transfer. Goldfinger, but by this time, Goldfinger had the piece of paper, the magic piece of paper. He takes it to a place called the Channel Islands, a little island off the coast of France, Jersey, right? And that allows him, don't worry, you'll get all this, to seize the money that was supposed to go to the Congo, right? Bribe was paid. Now, he'd also given money to the president of Zambia, so we follow. When I was meeting with the head of WTO, Ms. Bagman, who speaks 4 languages and has more than 4 disguises, goes in, follows the dictator around, goes into a boutique, and on his way to dropping the bribe money into a Swiss bank account, stops, does a little shopping, spends over $1 million cash, starting out with 200 pairs of elevator shoes because he's a shark there. And a diamond-studded tie. I mean, there's so many diamonds, she actually be more of tie-studded diamonds, you know. Zambia. You know, I know that Obama has said, gave a big speech the one day he was in the home of his ancestors in Africa about the corrupt African leaders. Well, Mr. Obama, who corrupted them? Goldfinger lives in Maryland. Okay? Now, that's why I was in this quarantine center. And the UNICEF, there's Doctors Without Borders, and they're saying, you know, we have this whole plan to drill. We're going to drill all these wells. We're going to, you know, and they laid out all the plans. And there were these Africans there, these guys from Senegal. Everyone was like so happy. They had villages coming out. They went out to the countryside, villages singing because the well was coming. The well was coming. And I had to tell them the well ain't coming. The well ain't coming. Goldfinger has the well. Money. Okay. And that's why we occupy. Now, we occupy Sally Mattingly on the Osage Reservation for Jason Anderson. Gone. Not found. Deepwater Rise. For Chief Prairie and his kids for Utah. For 13-year-old Janessa Gray, Jay Horton, and in Wasako, 14-year-old kid who was there in the Colorado quarantine area. It's not about the real estate, guys. Yeah, we can fight over whether we can be in a park or not in a park. It's not about the real estate. It's about the 1%. And it's about us and what we're going to do. I want you to go to vulturespicnic.org and want you to look at the films. By the way, one thing you can all get, and I did it because my publisher asked me not to, is download the first chapter of the book. It's free. Spread it around. That'll give you some information. Okay, get it there. Vulturespicnic.org. Please take it. Please take it. It's the information. Is Derek Robertson here, the great comic book artist who did Transmetropolitan? Oh, Derek, are you here? Take a bow, sir. He's doing a comic, Vultures Picnic. Never saw Transmetropolitan. More goddamn information in comic books in the New York Times, I can tell you that, especially from Derek Robertson. And who's going to be, thank you for your pen, is going to be turning Vultures Picnic into a brilliant comic book graphic novel. Thank you. But it's in Transmetropolitan. There's a great line, so I'm stealing your stuff there. That journalism is not a very fierce weapon. It has just one bullet. But if fired correctly, it can blow the kneecaps off the world. I want you to load the weapon. I want you to have the weapons. And I want you to join me because it's not about the real estate. We have to tell these guys the picnic is over. We are no longer, I know that they invited us, but I'm sorry, we're no longer